Hi, it's Lynn Shuck with Healing and Balance. We are going to be looking at front warrior, but very specifically at hip extension. Most of the time when we work in front warrior, where the back heel is up, so this is not warrior one, this is front warrior, you can see my pelvis is tipped forward. And when my pelvis is tipped forward, it lines up with that thigh bone. And then to get upright, most people just arch their back. Pelvis is still in line with the thigh bone. So I don't have any hip extension here. I'm building strength in my legs. There is a stretch in the front of my thigh, but I'm not actually getting hip extension where my pelvis is more upright and as my leg goes back. And you can see I don't have a lot of hip extension. Most of us don't. So we can work on our hip extension and explore in it in a couple different ways. Just ways to work on this aspect of the pose. This isn't the whole pose, but that's what we're focusing on today. So if I set up and I go ahead and instead of tucking my pelvis under to get upright, you see how that doesn't really bring my torso upright. I just could bend my knee and allow myself to have shoulder over hip and my back leg is bent, like I'm gonna, touch my knee to the ground. I'm staying very upright. Pelvis is upright. I'm starting to be in hip extension already, but I'm gonna very gradually push through my back heel toward the wall behind me, not toward the floor, but toward the wall, and see if I can get my leg a little bit straighter without tipping forward. And I can only get so straight, but boy, am I feeling this differently than I did before. Let's try the other side. So again, you can see I'm already tipped over, so I'm gonna bend my knee and allow myself to just sort of sink down and feel nice and upright. My weight's really between my feet. I'm gonna try and keep my pelvis upright, not let my pelvis move as I push my heel toward the wall behind me. Again, I'm not trying to push my heel back, which moves everything. I'm just trying to straighten that back leg by pushing my heel toward the wall behind me. I have to really use my abdominal muscles to keep my pelvis upright. Oh, it's something here. Just a little tip, many of us, the majority of my students and myself included, when we're back here have a tendency to be a little bit externally rotated, the front of the thigh turning out. So turn the front of that thigh in even as you're working in these variations that we're doing today. You'll feel it differently with that little bit of internal thigh rotation. So that's one way I could bend the knee. The other is, I go ahead and recognize I'm bent over and I'm gonna line my shoulders up with that and make a straight line. And now to come upright, I can't come up from my head and shoulders. I have to come up from the lowest part of my belly. I'm gonna keep my back leg really straight and I'm gonna try and lift the front of my pelvis up off of my thigh. And you'll see I don't get all the way to vertical, but I'm keeping my back leg straight. Make sense? So if I do the other side, I'll go ahead and stay with this side of the camera because you might see it better. I'm gonna allow myself, my pelvis is tipped over. I'm not gonna try and arch upright. Back leg is strong and straight. Heel is off the floor. And I'm gonna use my abdominal muscles. So I have my arms in a weird position just so you can see that. I'm gonna pull my belly up away from my thigh, the front of my pelvis coming up off my front thigh. And again, I don't get all the way vertical, and I could still be working on that slight internal rotation. So whether you might find one of these to be more comfortable to work in or one of them to give you a different experience, I often suggest to my students, if they're really familiar working from a bent leg to straight, or they're really familiar working from tipped to lifting, do the other one some too. But it doesn't really matter which one you work in. It's starting to understand, what does true hip extension feel like versus I'm upright and all of that upright is happening here and not at the hip. The pose has hip extension in it. We just often avoid it unintentionally, unconsciously, because we're not good at hip extension. But these two little variations can help you work on hip extension. So give it a try. Go.